Welcome to King's Corner here on the Guild of Un-Medicated Hijinks. You're here today with myself, the Lord, and the actual head of the show, Mr. Mel. Say hi, Mel.
Hi, Mel.
Good job, Mel.
So yeah, I'm Mel, or the King.
King of Hearts.
Yes, King of Hearts. I make them, I break them, I turn them into whatever I want.
I just collect them in jars.
That works too. But today, I had a few things that I would like to get off my chest. I did already get rid of a few things many years ago, but this is something else.
Thank you, because I'm like, if you don't jump on that line, I'm jumping. It's going to happen.
It's going to happen. But I have some rantings, and they've come up again recently because I've encountered situations where I've had to talk to people about the fact that I am transgender, and while I appreciate that people do try, there are times where the try is trying on me. Simply because the first thing that people assume or do is assume that they just have the right to ask you any damn question they feel like, especially the very personal ones, even though they've just met me.
What is your willy made of?
More like, how do you have sex? Where do you have sex? Who do you have sex with? And I don't...
Through the genitals, in the bedroom, with my wife. Oh wait, that sounds more like the Clue explanation.
Right.
I did it with my genitals in the bedroom with my wife.
Yes, and in normal conversation, this is not the first question we generally ask one another. Now, depending on the community you tend to be a part of, maybe. But upon meeting a person for the first time, we don't generally go directly to the how do you have sex and with whom do you have sex with, or objects or whatever your preference may be. But because I've told them something that is somewhat personal and quite intimate about myself, they immediately go to the intimate questions of how do I have sex and what are things like down there.
And who is your daddy and what does he do?
Mm-hmm. Other things that I've been asked, so dude, you're like gonna grow a dick, right? No. Have you taken a biology class? Did you pay attention? Because that's not what happens. As much as I would love for it to happen and not have to pay the exorbitant amount of money that it would cost for me to actually have a penis, I don't get to just, grow one that works and functions and it's,
I have
natural.
to admit, from experience, they are nice.
They are great.
But on the other hand, I've never had an experience with any other situation, so I have nothing to compare it to.
Yes. So, again, another question that people feel they can just ask about my genitalia and my plans with my genitalia, for my genitalia, and if I'm going to get different genitalia at all.
Dude, you can't just ask about genitals, jeez.
No. At least,
A little bit of foreplay there. Hi, what's your name? Where are you from? What do you do for a living? Tell me about your genitals.
Buy me a drink, take me out to dinner, something, I'm just that kind of guy.
If you want to play with them, just ask. God.
Mm-hmm. So, those are some of the questions that people just assume it is okay to ask because, well, you've told me you're transgender. That's very personal, so I just get to ask you every personal question now, right? No.
Well, this
do not do it.
It's just like sitting there with someone that's cisgendered, and your immediate response is, really, exactly how wide is your vagina? How long is your penis? Do your testicles hang one lower than the other? Is one of your breasts bigger than the other? You just don't ask these questions of other people.
Right.
Why is it suddenly okay just for someone to be like, I'm transgendered. Well, I'm cisgendered. Let's ask about each other's genitals.
Right.
Do we
Unless
have
the genitals
diagrams?
are going to meet.
Yeah, unless you're like, I really like our genitals to meet. I just want to make sure they're going to get along.
Right.
Let me tell you about mine first, because that's just polite. And then tell me about yours.
Yes.
And then we can exchange information about genitals. They can hand each other cards. Their people can call the other people. It'll be great.
what kind of things they like to do, what are their favorite, positions, whatever. We can get into the details later, but...
I have a penis. Its favorite position is upright.
Yes. There you go. But it's just one of those things that people don't stop to think about how that question is coming out of their mouth, or even if that question should come out of their mouth. And it just, as much as I love to be an educator, I want to educate people that ask questions out of the wanting to expand their knowledge, not the wanting to just gossip and find out bullshit about somebody else that they can talk that bullshit about that person to another person, and that bullshit becomes gossip, and then you get a reputation, and well, I'm just not all for that.
I've already got enough of a reputation, thank you.
Yes,
I've worked hard for that reputation,
as I have for mine, and I'd like to keep it that way. And I don't want to. I don't want to come off as being an asshole, but I've come to the point now where I'm willing to answer so many questions, and it just is all in how you ask it. So think about that, and not just for somebody who's transgender. Like, we can have dialogue about different diversities without being jackasses to the people we're asking these questions about. You don't just go up to somebody who's missing a limb. Hey, dude, what happened to your leg, man? It's just rude. So put it in that context. Like, would you ask a person who is got another type of disability, like, what the fuck happened to you? No, like, you might phrase it differently. You might be like, hey, so, like,
I'm going to argue your logic on the subject because you make it sound like you're comparing transsexuality to a disability.
No, what the point I'm trying to make is that you don't just, no matter who you're meeting, you just don't go right into the really personal, really in-depth, really, like, none of your goddamn business type of questions whenever you meet somebody. But it seems to happen more frequently with people who have different sexual orientations, or people who have gender expressions and presentations, that it's just okay that once somebody tells you this information, that you just get a free-for-all carte blanche to ask them whatever the fuck you want. And it's irritating to be constantly feeling like you're put on the defensive. You want to answer their question because in some part you think they're actually trying to get information, but on the other hand, maybe they're just being a dick. Mm-hmm. And again, it goes back to how you ask that question. And I've met nice people, though, who do ask questions in a dickish manner, but I've gotten to know them. Not so much, but I've gotten to know them, so I know that it's not coming from a place of being rude. It's a place of genuine curiosity and wanting to expand their knowledge and want to better themselves in that understanding of, the subject.
In other words, me. And but then again, also in all fairness, while I understand it would be thoroughly rude to meet, for instance, another cisgendered straight male and begin immediately asking him questions about the size and shape of his penis, I, for one, actually really wouldn't have a problem answering the question if someone else came up to me, like, oh, you're a straight cisgendered male? Could you tell us about your penis? Well, sure, I can. You wouldn't believe how much of a focus of my day it could be. But I also, again, have to remember that, this is not the sort of conversation I would expect from another person. This is not the sort of thing I'd walk up to someone, oh, really? Straight cisgendered male. Fantastic. So anyway, do you like having your asshole tickled while you're getting a blowjob? It's not how you begin a conversation unless you're trying to get this individual to give you a blowjob with an ass tickle involved. I mean, that's the thing is, if you want to know that much of a detail about someone else's genitals, it must be because you want to do something with them. Mm-hmm. There's really, unless you're a urologist, there's no other reason to have this information. If you're not a urologist, the actual, specific makeup and design of another individual's genitals has no bearing on them at all.
Or you're not the person that somebody is going to have relations with, mm-hmm. then it's not your damn business.
And truthfully, even at that situation, it's so I'm thinking of having relations with you. Could you please tell me about the diameter of your vagina and the amount of capacity it maintains? It's just not something you begin a conversation with on your date. Like, where would you like to go eat? Excellent. Now tell me about your vagina. I'd like to meet it later.
And will this butt plug fit?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's the only one I've got, and I want you to use it.
Yeah, how do you feel about anal?
Right.
Best response I ever got to that was, it's better to give than receive.
In some ways.
Although specifically that was for butt plugs. It was, how do you feel about butt plugs? And we got so many great responses, but the best one was one guy just sat there, stopped for a minute, actually thought about it and said, it's better to give than receive. We're just like, congratulations, you won. Your award will be arriving in 7 to 10 business days. Because I don't even know how else to respond to that. Because like I am the sort of person who I have wildly inappropriate questions in my mind because I'm curious about wildly inappropriate things. But I have a brain-mouth filter that prevents me from asking dumb fuck questions that are going to just insult people and not give me the information I want anyway. Or God help me if they actually give me the information I want, they're going to expect me to do something with it. And I'm like, no, I'm more like the collector. I just want to scribble this down in a notebook somewhere. That's all.
It may be used for some fodder later, but right now it's just going into a book for collections, and we'll let it sit there, and when I flip through it again and it strikes another idea, then maybe it'll get used, maybe it won't. But you never know. And
also, I'm just gonna go ahead and throw this out here, since we're actually in the process of enjoying some alcohol-infused teas. On August 27th, for those of you who are actually listening who live in or around the Madison area, the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence are having a fundraiser. It's going to be at the Shamrock, 117 Main Street in Madison, Wisconsin. And we're going to be serving a lovely buffet of food and alcohol-infused teas, which we're currently getting schnockered on while we record this. So if we say something wildly inappropriate, well, that's the reason I marked this as explicit content. But otherwise, if you want to join us, it's $10 at the door. And I'm personally going to be the one, A, providing the food involved, and B, I'm also the one that came up with the recipes for the alcohol-infused teas, and they are addictively wonderful. So you should come out and join us for that. All right, there's my PSA for the day. Moving on. Tell us, Mr. Mel, what else bothers you in the world?
Well, I mean, I'll try and stick to one topic for the evening so that we can use my other things that piss me off and pet peeves for another show. More content later.
Well, just throwing it out there. I mean, it's not like that has to be what your show is.
No,
this isn't Gin and Judgment.
No, that's.
This is Tea and Tiffs, I guess.
For the moment. But again, it's just I've been in a number of situations, and
Is that what you call them these days? I used to just call them orgies.
Yes, I've
but
been
I'm
in a
old.
number of orgies, groups, situations, whatever you want to call them, where I've been on speaking panels, and
I love how it goes right from that one to the other. Like,
Yep.
Oh yeah, orgies? No, I've been on speaking panels before.
Yep.
No, at that point in time, it's actually worthwhile to ask about the arrangement and situation with the genitals.
Exactly.
That's when it's appropriate, folks. Make a note.
But based on the number of times I've had to talk about my story or tell people about things,
Well, part of your story. I mean,
part of my story.
let's face it. Your entire story would be, an encyclopedic pile of books, as with all of us.
Sure. This is just one segment in the story of my life, but the one thing that I've noticed is I deal with a program at one of the local universities to help medical students understand what it is like being a transgender patient in the healthcare system. Unfortunately, I don't get to talk to them for as long as I would prefer. They don't get much of a Trans 101 education other than the half an hour that they get to spend with me. But in that time, having to break my story down into a nutshell and really focus on how it is for providers of healthcare has given me some different perspective, too, on how to approach the way people ask me questions as well. Healthcare providers really want to know how to give you the best care, and what if I have somebody that I suspect might be a transgender patient, and how do I handle that situation? And
light fondling. Once permission's been given.
Once permission's been given.
That's why I'm a doctor.
I think their biggest concern is they don't want to miss providing care for somebody. But I said, like, one of the biggest things is I've heard a number of horror stories about transgender or gender nonconforming, gender neutral people going in for basic medical care and being refused that basic medical care because the doctor just has no idea either what transgender means, doesn't want to deal with it because of their beliefs, and that just, depending on the situation, I've blown my top more than enough times.
That could be taken several different ways.
That can be taken several different ways.
But I love the very comment you made of, because of their beliefs. What exactly in your beliefs would cause you to stop believing someone was a human in need of medical care?
Well, especially when you've taken the Hippocratic Oath to
doesn't require you to be a hypocrite. Right.
But I have talked to individuals who their provider said, God did not make people to change themselves in this way. And
yeah, because humans never change. We're exactly the same from the time we're born to the time we die.
Yeah, we've never evolved over millennia. We're still walking around like gorillas and Neanderthals.
No, at that point you register a complaint with the medical association and move on to a different medical provider.
The hard thing, though, is that if you live in a rural area and the closest clinic is already 15, 20 minutes away, and then the next closest one might be a couple hours drive, you start becoming limited in your choices. And if one provider has that mentality in that clinic, it's likely that many or most of them, or not all of them, do. I know that there is a group in the state of Wisconsin that is working to educate healthcare providers in more rural areas. Even if it's just, like, you don't have to be a dick about it, even being a medical professional. Like, you can say, look, I do not know how to treat your situation. I'm not familiar with transgender patients, and I'm not sure that I would be the best provider for you. Just be open and honest and don't be a dick. And that's usually, I say that in a much nicer way to a lot of these medical students. Like, you have to be honest about what you're willing to do and what kind of care you're willing to provide. And don't make a promise to a patient that you're going to help them or try to help them and then turn around and just completely drop them off a cliff. And I say that mostly because the suicide rate among the transgendered community and the gender nonconforming community is much higher.
I'd imagine it'd be skyrocketingly higher depending on per capita.
Considering that about 1% to 2% of the population is transgender or gender nonconforming, of that 1%, over 40% are depressed or have attempted suicide at least once.
Suicidal or have committed suicide.
Right. And that's just based on the statistics that have been reported. So, like, when you are a provider, or even a therapist, doesn't matter what your role. Like, if you are not willing to treat a transgender patient because you're not sure how, that's one thing.
Yeah, ignorance. Ignorance is acceptable because you can always educate an ignorant person.
Right. And if you're willing to learn, great. Say you're willing to learn and you're going to help this person along the journey and you're going to learn about things together. But if you're not willing to learn, like, just be honest. Like, even if it's about your beliefs, don't just say, look, I may not be the provider for you. Let me see. Like, at least try and help. That's the least you can do if you're going to turn somebody away at the door.
I'm still stuck in that whole belief thing because, again, it's just like, Well, my belief is that God's not okay with this. Which God? Oh, well, be it whatever, Christian God, Muslim God, however. And so you're not going to treat anybody who is not of the religion you practice.
Or just, you hear all the stories. Like, there are pharmacists who refuse to dole out birth control because they don't believe that birth control is what God intended, because go forth and procreate is a part of the Bible. And that's fine. You can totally have that belief. But what you are doing is you are causing another human being to suffer in a health-related manner.
Not just one, multiple.
Right. Multiple health-related issues.
Because if there's one thing we know about, especially teenagers and young adults, they're going to perform the actions of procreation. If you give them protection, they're less likely to actually procreate, but they're going to keep doing the same action. They're biologically hardwired to. Whereas if you give them some choice as to whether or not they actually procreate, then the odds of having an unwanted pregnancy are a lot less. Sure. And then that affects minimal three lives. Mm-hmm. Mother, father, and child. All affected by the choice of whether or not they can actually control a pregnancy. Because if you end up with a child who's not wanted, that's not good for the child. That's not good for the parents. No. If you end up with parents who are not ready, mm-hmm. even if they're perfectly willing, perfectly decent, but if they're not ready, if they're not personally capable, if they're not financially capable of taking care of a child, that's 3 victims you got there. And that's just the baseline. You're not talking about what the parents go through, what the school systems go through, what governmental agencies go through, trying to deal with all of these unwanted and unnecessary children who could have been prevented with something so simple as birth control.
Right. And
God helps those who help themselves, I believe, is one of the particularly colorful points of the Bible. And I'm sorry, if you're actually taking an active interest in your own personal health and your own body to help yourself to do whatever it is you're supposed to do, that's supposed to be what God likes.
Right.
That's supposedly God's plan.
And I guess, not to get too far off on this tangent, but
Screw it, let's do it.
But if you're not willing to provide the birth control, and somebody does get pregnant because there was no protection or protective measures used, and you're also against abortion, I don't want to say which is the worst of the two evils, but let's just go ahead and go down that road. If you feel that abortion is far worse because it is taking a life, then why not do the preventive measure to not make that happen in the first place? Mm-hmm. Because not everybody wants to even go through the entire pregnancy and give that up, because that situation is not only emotionally hard, but it's physically hard, because you still have to carry to term, you have to go through the entire pregnancy, and then sometimes you do discover that you don't want to give the baby up, no matter how many pieces of paper you've signed. And as the mother of a child, as the parent of a child, you have that right. You still have parental rights. There are...
Well, and some of that just gets bloody creepy. A couple of our wonderful senators are trying to... Thank God they're failing, but they're trying to push through bills that if a rape victim ends up pregnant, the rapist has the authority to stop the child from being aborted.
Right.
And I'm like, no.
No.
You do not protect the rights of a rapist as far as a child goes.
You don't get to have a child that you made forcefully, because who else? Clearly there is something disconnected inside your brain that, first of all, thought it was okay to forcibly have
force
sex.
yourself sexually on someone else. Yeah.
And then now you're going to raise a child or force somebody to raise your child? No, I don't think so. Mm-mm. There's something wrong in your head, and mentally unstable people are not going to make the best parents. Let's just put it out there.
Which is why I have problems with anyone who does the whole, well, it's against my religious beliefs. I'm like, I've read your book. Yeah, no, it's not, actually. You'd be surprised the number of things your book thinks are just fine. You can actually stone your own children to death if they get raped and refuse to marry the rapist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's morality for you. At that point, you don't really have... If you are endorsing a book like that, you don't really have the right to stand up and... force your morality on other people because you clearly don't have a basis.
will say, well, we're only going to follow the New Testament, the later half of the book, because the first half was far too violent. Yet you're still quoting from it. You're still taking pieces of it to suit your own personal agenda.
Well, and
political
even if they
agenda.
want to do that, like, okay, fine, let's take the whole New Testament. Show me one passage, one thing, anywhere. Because apparently, according to the New Testament, Jesus just never shut up. Which is really the best way you can explain the New Testament. Like, oh, dude, Jesus never shut up. So, okay, if he was so damned concerned with homosexuality, please show me where he said this in his book at all. Like, I think Russell Brand put it best when he says, if Jesus had such a huge problem with homosexuality, he had the chance to address it in his top 10 do's and don'ts. According to Jesus, who said that technically the original 10 commandments were solid and should be followed, and he was only going to add an 11th one, which said you should love each other as I have loved you. That's cute. But again, that means that God is way more picky about whether or not you covet your neighbor's oxen than whether or not you go over to your neighbor's house to have gay sex. Like, if you have the option, if you're like, Bill over there, he's got a nice ox and a nice ass. I feel like I need one of those. Well, I'll go with the lesser of two sins. Bill, bend over. Just hold on to the ox. You know, if it was such a big concern, why is it like the laws of ox goring are spelled out completely, ridiculously clearly? Homosexuality is mentioned, I believe, 2 to 3 times, and even some of those are sort of gray at best. And some of the translations are even off. There's actually one line where it's like, you should not lay with another man as you would with a woman. The only problem is the original translation is a bit gray. And one of the potential meanings is that you should not lay with a boy as you would with a woman, not with another man. And not to mention one of the other injunctions is you're not to have sex through the mouth in the ways of certain beasts, because they believe that several beasts actually reproduce by porking in the mouth.
Wow.
So technically, yeah, the Bible's also against oral sex, but I have a funny feeling some of those Christian crusaders, you know, indulge in a blowjob or two. Just saying.
Well, right. I mean, you know, you're out, you're gone, you're away from your wives and loved ones.
Well, even if you're with your wives and loved ones, it's not separated out to, well, as long as it's with your significant other, your wife or husband, it's okay. It's like, you shouldn't do it at all. So if your wife wants to give you a bit of fluffing before you start the pounding, well, I'm sorry, that's a sin.
Well,
Yeah, well, it's like, no, let's just take the convenient things.
one could also argue, though, that to have sex with a man is to perform sodomy, and sodomy is not.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing, is technically sodomy is illegal throughout the entirety of all the Abrahamic faiths.
Well,
But on the other hand, same problem. It's very, very limited about telling you about that. Like, they're way more specific about what you do with cattle
yes.
than they are what you do with people of the same sex.
Right. There are far more passages related to how to treat one another, behave around other people, and very, very few passages about how you boink them.
There are more passages about whether or not you should eat a rock badger.
Yeah.
Argue it, I dare you. But it's true.
No.
Like, the things that are in the Bible, like, there are so many more things in the Bible that are way more specific, way more spelled out, clear as hell. I don't see anyone walking around with placards saying, don't eat the shellfish. God said no.
Right.
But they're like, God hates fags. Like, no. The Bible's very specific about that. God hated figs. He had a huge issue with fig trees. Really didn't seem to give a flying rat's ass about gay people.
Right.
At all. And not to mention, he was a dude that traveled around with 12 other dudes. That's a little questionable in and of its own right. And not to mention 12 other dudes that thought he was God and was willing to do anything he said. So I'm like, if for someone who was supposedly championing the heterosexual lifestyle, he didn't do anything heterosexual at all.
No. Nope. And
So
even-
as such, it's like anytime the faith subject is brought in on it, I'm like, No, fuck your faith. Your faith has nothing to do with this. Your faith has no concept of morality, any sort of decent morality that humanity should be following. You just think it does. It's like, I see this all the time in the memes, where it's like, yeah, saying you want to be part of a religion when you haven't actually fully studied the literature and books involved is like clicking I agree to an Apple product when you've never actually read the terms and conditions.
Right.
And some of those terms and conditions are pretty messed up.
Yeah, I mean, if you... Not to generalize all faiths, but...
Go ahead, do it. Well, Abrahamic faiths are easy.
I mean, they all boil down to very simple things. Treat others as you want to be treated. And
Rabbi Hillel said that as far as when he was asked if he could summarize the whole of the Torah while standing on one leg. And he said, yes, the whole of the Torah amounts to treat others as you would like to be treated. All else is commentary.
And if you want to be treated like a dick, fine, then treat other people like dicks. But then don't complain when, somebody has treated you poorly.
If you're going to treat people poorly, you're going to be treated poorly. Although I will point out that Christopher Hitchens actually had an excellent response to this because he said there is a basic issue with that. I do not want someone like, for instance, Charles Manson to be treated the way I would like to be treated.
Yes.
There are situations where people should be treated differently because of extenuating circumstances.
Sure. We have religious law, and then we have the law that's created by man.
Well, religious law is bullshit, but anyway, yeah, you were
right.
saying.
Well, right. I mean, if we were to follow strict religious laws, there would be a lot more people dead and broken and...
Well, if you need an example of that, the number of countries that are currently run by Sharia law.
Mm-hmm.
And not to mention the fact that even, if you're like, well, that's the Muslims, that's not them Christians, like, we're America, we're all into Christians. Yeah, last time Christianity actually had power, we called it the Dark Ages. That was the last time Christianity was in charge. We called it the Dark Ages. We lost all sense of medical history. We lost all sense of medical development. We lost all sense of personal development. It literally was a horrible time where nothing happened, which is why it was the Dark Ages. People died miserably, all the while thinking that the problem with everything was that they didn't have enough faith. Where it didn't matter how much faith they had, they still died. And to this day, it's one of my favorite arguments to someone who's like, well, no, I just believe in Jesus and God, and I don't believe in all that science shit. I'm just like, yeah, so you're telling me that if your child had cancer, you'd take your child to the church, not the hospital?
That's a scary thought, especially considering...
Well, we know there are some people who are just that stupid, but anyone that actually cares enough about their children to not want them to die would be like, yeah, hospital.
Generally, yeah, but, there are people who are strong enough or claim to be strong in their faith, and they are willing to follow those guidelines very strictly and know that and believe that God will provide and God will take care of whatever illness is affected their child or their loved one. And I, on a personal level, have issue with that, but, if I were a healthcare provider, you have to actually respect those wishes, and it's really hard, when certain faiths don't believe in blood transfusions, and, the person's literally bleeding out. But the family says no, because God will provide, and God will take care, and God will mend. At that point, as a healthcare provider, you cannot cross that boundary and purposely give that person an infusion. To do so, you would lose your license and your entire practice. So,
which is horrible if you think about it, especially when you're talking about, if you have an adult individual of normal mental capacity who says, no, I have religious beliefs, and as such, I do not want a transfusion, I do not want a transplant, I'm just going to go with whatever God wants. That's cool. You're an adult. You should be allowed to make that choice. It's when you talk about children that it's no. At that point, the child is not allowed to make that decision. As Marcus Brigstock pointed out, A 4-year-old is no more a Christian, a Jew, or a Muslim than they are a member of the Postal Workers Union. They don't know anything yet. They cannot really make that decision. So to force that decision upon a child, I think, is one of the greatest forms of child abuse imaginable.
Right, but some people will say that by proxy, it is the parent's job to raise that child in the faith that they are practicing, and by doing so, that means they get to make the decision based on their religion. They are the caretaker for that child, and whether...
But we know that doesn't apply to all things. Like, for instance, there are a number of religions that believe in corporeal mortification, or the damage of the body in order to remove sin or impurities. However, if you were to whip a child because your religion said to, that would be child abuse. There wouldn't be a gray area there. They wouldn't go, oh, wait, I'm sorry, that's your religious belief that caused you to whip your child bloody? Then it's okay. Because as long as your religion said to do it, that's fine. It's like, no, there would be no gray area there. They'd be like, no, that's child abuse. If you were part of one of the more messed up religions that feels that sexual activity is the way to reach divine nature, and you decided that that also included children, it would be child abuse. And there would be no point of, well, no, see, it's not child abuse because my religion said so. I don't see why that does not extend to putting a child in the hospital when they're like, they need life-saving medical care. If you deny it to them, then that is child abuse. It doesn't matter what your faith says. It doesn't matter what your religion says.
And I personally agree with that. It's just hard that there are so many areas, so many crossovers between when religious beliefs, religious convictions overstep the boundaries of the laws that man has made. Because yes, if we saw somebody beating their child up and down the aisle, like, we would call child services, we would call the cops, we would say, this is going on.
Yeah, and it would be a crime, and it really wouldn't matter if someone's like, look, says right here, I can stone my child if they misbehave.
Right, I have the right to sell my daughter into prostitution.
Yeah.
You know, like...
The thing is, if we can make exceptions...
Because we've come to a state of understanding and knowledge and development that we realize that these things are wrong. Even if they are part of a religion, we understand fundamentally that they are wrong, they are cruel, they are no longer a necessity, because we have other laws governing us to prevent things like stoning our children to death and selling them off to prostitution. So, again, if we have come to an evolution standpoint that these things are fundamentally wrong, despite our religious beliefs, then we need to...
And folks, it is despite the religious beliefs, because the religious beliefs say something totally different about all of the above.
Right. If we can get to that point about certain things that are said in the religious text that we choose to be a part of and read and take into our lives, if we can overstep those certain parts, then why can't we overstep the concepts that homosexuality is a sin, that being transgender is a sin, that doing things to our bodies are sin, when we clearly understand that they are not hurting another person, they are not going against or harming another, then it's none of your damn business.
Yeah. And not to mention the fact that, even according to the documents they themselves have, like, Jesus didn't exactly go around and go, all right, now bring me the religious leaders. He found 12 random sinners and said, you guys, you're my posse. So it's not like Jesus himself particularly had a huge issue with sinners. People committing sin, it's okay. Technically, according to Christianity, everybody's a sinner. It doesn't matter.
You were born a sinner, and Jesus died for your sins, therefore you will go to heaven. Done. So sin all you want on this earthly plane, because God and Jesus are going to save you.
Not to mention, Jesus was really specific about that very concept, where he's like, well, how about the one without sin? You go ahead and start throwing rocks.
Waiting.
Which at that point, like, Jesus could have pulled the best joke ever, because, Jesus is God, so Jesus could have been the one like, here we go, bam, and just hit someone with a rock, like, I win. But no, I mean, like, You can't sit there and, like, throw stones at people for being sinners if you yourself are a sinner and everyone's a sinner according to Christianity, so what does it matter?
Right, I mean...
Like, why are you picking one out and be like, well, but that sin is really bad? And, like, half the time, the loudest and most boisterous voices on the subject are the Cathals, the child molesters. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, you guys tell us all about morality. Please explain morality, because there's no way we could understand it unless a bunch of celibate child molesters in purple velvet explain it.
Yeah, when you have bishops and cardinals and whomever protecting themselves and priests...
The Pope.
And the Pope. And
the Pope himself actually has been called into question any number of times. It's just everyone hates the fact because supposedly the Pope's perfect. Pope can't do anything wrong. But the Pope has been caught on numerous occasions. Several popes now have been caught protecting and moving around child molesters in order to protect them from legal consequence.
Right. And,
just like the church itself is not physically an entity that can be sued. You can't file a lawsuit against the Catholic Church. It's impossible.
Well, right. And yet there's a lot of debate of whether or not churches should continue to receive the particular fundings that they do, especially with the political stances that they choose to take. If you want to act as an entity that deals in politics, then you are no longer a protected not-for-profit.
Well, and the thing is, at that point, we already subsidize all the churches by not making them pay taxes.
Right.
When everyone else has to pay taxes. And, if you're going to play around in political fields, pay the price of admission like everyone else does.
Sure.
Otherwise, you're taking in billions of dollars a year, not paying any taxes on all of it, and trying to tell everyone else what to do with their money.
Right. And, just the whole, like, because I'm a
follower of whatever religion, it doesn't matter.
Right.
I'm a spiritual person.
I'm
like, yeah, so are aliens.
I'm exempt from, all law, religious or otherwise, because...
Exempt from criticism, really, is the problem.
Yeah. Well, and we treat religious figures, priests and such, almost with a similar hand as a judge would be treated, where you cannot bring lawsuits against judges because they sort of have this immunity to the decisions that they've made. And so by being a priest, you have immunity to be religiously persecuted. But you're not. I mean, basically, it all comes down to you're a human being just like anybody else. You fucked up, and whatever it was that you did, if you stole money from your church, whether you molested a child, doesn't matter. You fucked up. You broke a human law, and for that, I mean, you should be treated just as any other person would if they'd done the same thing.
Yeah.
And because you're generally looked at with
the illusion that you're supposed to be informing people as to their morality.
Right, and you should be held to a higher standard because of that.
I have the exact same opinion about police officers in general. I'm
Exactly.
sorry, if you're a police officer and you committed a crime, and we're not talking about an accidental crime.
Right.
I'm not talking about an incident. Like, for instance, if you do a forcible entry on a drug house, and a child runs through a room too fast for you to identify a target, and you shoot that child, and the child is wounded or dies, I take exemption to that, because that is an honest mistake that can be made.
Yes.
But when you're just a cop that's, shaking people down for money or running prostitutes or whatever it is you're doing, if you are knowingly and premeditatively breaking the law, you should be held to a higher standard.
Yes.
Because everyone else in the country, literally, we agreed to follow the federal, state, and local laws by proxy of the fact that we have not moved. That is it. But when you're talking about law enforcement, you're talking about individuals who are specifically trained not only in the law, but in how it applies and how it should be enforced. Mm-hmm. Which means you not only had knowledge that the average person does not, as far as the number of laws and the ways in which you are breaking them. You have specifically betrayed the trust of the entire public by agreeing, swearing to uphold those laws and instead breaking them.
Yeah.
At that point, it's like, well, due to your years of service. No, fuck your years of service. Your years of service show exactly how badly you have screwed everyone over.
Well, right, and especially, I mean, I don't want to get into any one specific story because there's plenty of them out there right now.
Well, right now it's just horrible.
It's just absolutely horrible. I know plenty of people in law enforcement that are fantastically wonderful people, but when you hear stories about, a particular officer who was rejected from one police station, was rejected from the academy, went back, had poor grades, was even suggested that he not be ever given a position because they worried about his mental stability, worried about his actual ability to perform the job in a manner consistent with their rules, their guidelines, and the way an officer should conduct themselves when they are given these recommendations to all of the police stations in that state. This guy is not quality material. This is not a person you want to hire. And then he gets a job working for one of the lowest, crappiest police stations in the state because they have nobody else. And then, ends up having an incident where they shoot a person to kill them, despite the fact that this person offered no threat, and then is still not reprimanded, despite all of this history, all of this documented history, that this person is mentally unstable and should not be given a position or a gun, period.
Well, at that point, it's not even reprimanded. The person should be brought up on charges.
Exactly.
Period. End of story. It's not even oh, well, we're going to slap your little wrist and you're not going to advance. No.
And had previous, reprimands. Was given previous suspensions for extreme, use of force and all of these things. This is not a person who should be protecting and serving a community. Period.
Because they're not doing either of the above.
Right. And yet, for every one person like this guy, there are probably handfuls of people that are wonderful, wonderful law enforcers. And I applaud them for the tough job that they have to do. But every story of the person who should not have gotten this job to begin with, I just don't understand how it can happen. How we allow that, how they're...
Well, as far as that basic situation goes, I mean, it's essentially the same thing as with Catholic priests. Not all Catholic priests are child molesters. Actually, a very, very small fraction of them are actually child molesters. Most of them are probably really good, decent human beings that you wouldn't mind sitting down and having a scotch with. Lovely people, have a lovely discussion, that sort of thing. But the problem is, even though it's the minority of police officers that will actually go to the point of acting on racist impulses, even if they have them, it's the minority of priests that will go to the point of molesting a child. The problem is that minority proves the point about the potential ineligibility of the individuals in the job. Mm-hmm. Yes, that means that no, not everyone who gets called, I'm making air quotes for those of you that can't see me currently, all of those who get called to be priests should necessarily be priests. Maybe some of them you should just sort of let go. Same thing with cops.
Let go and let God.
if you don't have the basic decency that supposedly God gave all of humanity, then maybe no, you shouldn't be a police officer. You probably should just, do something else. Security guard. I understand the world needs security guards. Let's do that. But the idea that someone can be above reproach because of a position they've been given is proven wrong by this minority percent. Mm-hmm. And that means that, no, we do need to take a long, hard look at everyone involved.
But even nowadays, I mean, they're giving security cops tasers and, loaded weapons. I used to work for a security company. You actually, could go through different levels of education and training to actually be a fully carried security guard. Mm-hmm. You are, literally one step below becoming a police officer. All you have to do is basically go to the police academy at that point, and you are then becoming an officer. You are just, this hair below an actual officer. That's still scary. If you still have, whatever...
Well, but was it something that was open to everyone, or something that was open to you as a capable human being?
It was open to anyone in the company, as long as, they went through the necessary, mental.
See,
You
that's
know, like-
where it's like I kind of wonder what's going on with mental evaluations in police officers.
Right. Like
'Cause I feel like maybe you need to take a better look at some of them.
well, right, and the security company that I worked for, like, it was run by a retired police officer, and he was a fantastic guy. Like he was, you know, a gruff kind of guy, but he knew what the job was. He knew what was required. He was actually a decent human being, and he knew that in order to have people serving in certain capacities, there was a certain level of not only physical but mental and emotional,
And moral.
like capacity
I
that
mean, you
you
should have
to
some
think-
serious morals and ethics at that point if you're going to carry a
Right.
weapon.
Right, you know, and so, like, it was required that if you were going to carry a firearm, you had to go through a mental evaluation, you had to go through so many hours of, firearm training and, like, actual situational training.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when is it okay to actually draw a weapon and when it's not okay? And that's actually more than most police officers are given in an academy. Like, get out of my...
Bella would like to instigate her views too. She's the one that's been whining in the background this whole time because she's difficult.
Yes. You know, so just for every one bad seed, there is going to be handfuls and hundreds of others. And for every one crappy doctor that, you know,
Treats you like shit.
That treats somebody like shit, or says I won't perform this particular operation because it's, you know, against my beliefs, whatever. For every just crappy, you know, professional that is out there that we expect and we hold to a certain standard because of what they do, there are clearly hundreds and hundreds of others in those professions that are great. It's just, it always comes down to the one or two bad ones, and you have to take those into consideration. I think you have to make examples of them. You have to say, when is enough is enough, and when are we going to stop letting certain people get away with the things that they have done?
Well, and also, like I said, when you still have to look at that small percentage and accept the fact that they prove the point that the entire group is not beyond reproach. They are not beyond scrutiny, because clearly there is something more scrutinizing there.
Mm-hmm.
Should we take a harder look at priests and doctors and police officers and make sure that they're the kind of people capable of doing the jobs they've been handed?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah! Don't just automatically assume, oh, well, he's got a badge. He must be a decent human being. Maybe, maybe not. Oh, well, that's a priest. His viewpoint must be extremely moral. Not necessarily.
No.
Oh, that's a doctor. He must be very competent and open-minded and capable of helping everyone. Unfortunately, no.
No.
But
And-
that's the thing, is we can't just automatically assume this anymore, and we need to start making that a little bit more of a priority when it comes to selecting which of these people get these titles and positions.
Right. I mean, and let's even, like, go down a couple levels further. I mean, first responders, EMTs, I can't tell you the number of stories that I've heard about EMTs showing up to a situation, whether it was domestic abuse, it doesn't matter, or gunshot, or heart attack, but because a person is different colored, different gendered, different whatever, like, there are people who have been refused treatment or left there to suffer even more because a first responder just did not want to deal with that person.
Which is weird, because when maybe it's just the people I spend time with, but all the first responders I deal with and have dealt with are the ones that are just like, yeah, let me tell you the story of what I walked into. And they tell the most bizarre stories, and they're like, and we did everything we could to help that person. No matter how bizarre the story was, because they walk into some of the craziest things, and half the time they're, you know, when I talk to them or get them on the shows, they're always like, please, for the love of God, we're just there to help you. That's all we want to do is help you. Please be honest with us.
Right.
If you tell us a story, you can end up really messing up your own medical care, and that's not what we want. Just tell us the truth, and we'll fix it.
Right.
We will secure it as best as we can. We'll fix it. We'll get you out of there. And
If
your
you-
dignity is not the first thing we worry about.
Right.
It's not even the second, third, or fourth thing. It is on there. We don't mind trying to take that into account.
Sure.
We're sorry about that, but your life, your safety, and your health are more important. So just please be honest. Otherwise, you're jeopardizing all of that for the sake of your dignity.
Right.
Which is pretty much already lost by the fact that you had to call us.
Right. You know, when we're trying to get that broken light bulb out of your asshole, like, just sit still. Like, don't tell us that you accidentally sat on it. Just Just be honest. We know it's there. I mean, clearly we can see it. Whatever. Like, we don't care that it's up there. We care that it comes out without hurting you.
Yeah, well, not to mention, it's like your first responders are the people that they're the craziest bastards in the world. Anyone who's ever seen the movie Bringing Out the Dead with Nicolas Cage, that's pretty much what they're like. They're all a little mentally unstable because they've had to deal with everything under the sun. If you can shock them, not only are they not going to be horrified, they'll be impressed.
Right.
Because
they haven't seen it yet.
Like, you did something they've never seen before, you will impress them, not horrify them. Just tell them the truth. That's all it takes to save your life, and sometimes literally your ass. Mm-hmm. Just by like, look, I was screwing around, this is what I did, and you save yourself so much trouble.
Sure. Because the sooner the situation gets taken care of, the sooner they're also gone and out of your life, and the less you have to explain to them.
Yeah, well, not to mention the fact that then they become the liaison between you and the doctor. Because then the doctor already knows the basics of the situation. All they need is a few details and then bang, medical care. And you didn't have to sit there and be like, well, Doc, we were having a party. And there was an argument about the diameter of a light bulb. And so I felt the need to quench the argument in the best way possible. Why everyone was dressed in leather is my own damn business. You know?
Yeah, but
I spoke up to Daddy wrong, and Daddy corrected me. He said he had a bright idea on how to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. But it just is one of those things. It's just a craw in my side that it's unfathomable. I do not know how to wrap my head around how people cannot provide basic care and basic decency to another human being.
Well, but think about it this way, like, it's actually gotten now so bad, especially in law enforcement particularly, where people are now targeting law enforcement and physically assaulting and or killing them.
Right, and that does nothing to reprimand or fix or generate a better situation. What that does is that escalates an already escalated situation. And every time we escalate, we get to the point where what are you going to have? An entire community and an entire police force having a shootout? Are we going to go to mini civil wars in our own private little towns because we're sick of the incidents that are happening? No, it has to come with, we have to start communicating. And I know that people think communicating is showing up and screaming at and holding signs and yelling and spitting and doing all these things. This is not how we communicate. This is not the way to get your point across. It's sitting down at a table, everybody listening. I hate to use a kindergarten phrase, but we have to put on our goddamn listening ears. Put on your listening ears and listen and hear. Not just listen, but hear. That's the thing we forget. You can listen, you can be a selective listener and hear the things that you want to hear and be a competitive listener. Sorry, I'm using
a competitive listener?
A competitive
listener. I listen better than you listened.
Well, it's more like you're waiting for the next chance to prove how you're better, or it's that
well, at
machismo.
That point,
like,
you're not listening. You're waiting for your chance to speak.
Right, exactly.
And that's not very helpful either. About the only thing that's even halfway helpful about the fact that people have been attacking officers is that it changes the direction the guns have been facing, which is a horrible concept, and it's not one of those where I'm like, I'm so glad that now normal citizens are killing them back. It's like, when you change the perception of something, when you change something like the direction that the guns are pointing, everyone stops and actually pays attention. And at that point, you start dealing with real problems. It was just like 9/11, as Noam Chomsky pointed out. The big thing with 9/11 wasn't that we were attacked. It was the fact that we were attacked on our own soil. Like, usually, we are the ones doing this sort of thing to other people. This is the first time other people really did this to us. Mm-hmm. And the fact that just tiny little difference, the difference of the direction the guns were pointing, brought so much attention on it. Before that, terrorism was just something that you brought up in a video game. Mm-hmm. Why am I shooting those people? Oh, they're terrorists. Shoot them. It's okay because they're terrorists. It was basically the fallback to, well, we made too many Nazi games, so who else can we shoot automatically? Terrorists, fine. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden it became everything about terrorists. And we actually started learning about terrorists, learning why terrorists are terrorists, learning what is terrorism, and starting the debate about what is terrorism. And all it took was for the guns to be pointed in the other direction one time. There have already been several instances of police officers being shot by people who are tired of being shot by police officers. And while I think it's good, we're done. Like, the point has been made that the guns can be pointed in the other direction. The advantage of that is that it can facilitate speech in a more serious way because it gives the police a reason to listen. Up until now, they have all the authority. They've never had a reason to actually listen because they can just sort of shuffle things around until something else hits the news, and all of a sudden, whatever horrible crime a police officer's committed, poof, it's out of the news, and they can do some sort of official reprimand or nothing, because they can just say, well, he was hounded by the media, so we're calling that good, and poof, he's back on the force, or we moved him to another area. Yeah. But now it's like that they have that reality check of, there's a lot more of us, and we're a lot better armed. So please do not start arbitrarily killing us, because it gets really bad when we decide to do the same thing back to you. Mm-hmm. So now please listen to us when we say, stop shooting us for no reason. Yep. And that makes them take it more seriously. It's not a matter of, like, good, let's escalate it. Like, no, at this point, can be enough of an understanding to properly de-escalate it. Not just, well, we're in power, so I guess we'll be nice to you, but like, oh, yeah. It's just like with the government, like, there's a whole lot more of us than them, and they need to understand this point. People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments are supposed to be afraid of their people.
Sure. And, there's a lot of me that agrees that now that the tables have turned some, that hopefully that everybody starts realizing that firepower is not going to get a solution. It's going to be a conversation and starting to understand where everyone's coming from and starting to understand the proper way to handle the situation. But I think you have to be in the right frame of mind, because the other side of that third-sided coin really is that, oh, well, now you've just proven our point that now that you've fired on police officers, it clearly shows that you're the type of community that we need to be worried about.
Yeah, but that's the problem, is it wasn't just one incident.
No,
this hasn't happened one time.
No.
This has happened many times in different parts of the country.
But there are plenty of people that are going to say, that just proves the point that you are the type of people, you are those people, air quotes, that need that kind of police attention, because clearly you're going to escalate to violence. And it's like, no. You got to step back. They have been pushed into a corner. They have been persecuted and like just violated all of their civil liberties. Mm-hmm. And what else are they going to do? You don't back a jaguar into a corner and piss it off and not expect it to come lunging at you, full claws and jaws open.
Well, yeah, I mean, like in the background, you can hear two dogs wandering around my house that are just clamoring for attention.
Have you fed them?
Oh, it is about that time.
It's way back.
But, they're good dogs. They're sweet dogs. They love everybody. But I guarantee you hold them in a corner and start punching them, sooner or later they're going to bite. That's just natural self-preservation.
You're right. And I mean, that's what it all comes down to, is we don't think about people as people when they behave wildly, because we want to treat them like animals. And it's just like, we have the right as human beings to not be kicked and punched around.
That's right.
To be put into a corner, to be put into a box, to be put into somebody else's, confines, and not feel pissed off about it and not want to do something about it to make that change. And, if we could all just have a conversation, that would be great. But sometimes it doesn't start with a conversation. It starts with an escalation to prove a point.
Mm-hmm. Which to me, I'm like, I think it can be a good thing that the point has been proven.
Right.
It's not, I personally, if it were up to me, if I were the strategist making those decisions, I would not have gone after random cops. That was the thing I kind of have an issue with, because, okay, we've shot and killed now, I think, close to a dozen police officers throughout the country.
At least.
And the thing is, which ones did you shoot? Did you shoot the nice ones, the decent ones, the ones that are out there just doing their job like good people?
Mm-hmm.
The ones that really just want to help people and protect people, that have that protection instinct? That's the reason why they decided to be police officers in the first place? Or did you shoot the ones the very few that tend to violate rights? Now, if they had targeted it and yes, there were multiple assassinations of police officers that had gotten off after lethally ending the lives of individuals for no particularly good reason. Then I'd be like, okay, I think you've done the thing and you've made the sense of it. But if you're just going to target randomly, then you're making a mistake in that, because you're making the good ones the targets instead of the bad ones.
Sure, I guess...
Because then there's more at least of a direct retribution where it's like, no, it's not putting on the uniform and putting on a badge that's going to make you a target. It's targeting the community you live in and victimizing them. That's what's going to make you a target. Don't be the target.
Sure, but as a personal belief, I don't think the eye for an eye is the best solution. I mean, it has woken a lot of people up.
Well, and it never will be. It's never going to be a proper eye for an eye. Like, for instance, the people who have been shooting police officers shot people. And the main issue is that they didn't even get a reprimand from it, or if they did, it was the smallest, most pointless thing to make people happy. They technically got a reprimand.
Yeah.
The people that are shooting police officers are being shot and killed. Mm-hmm. There's no in between there. There is no, well, they just got a reprimand.
Right.
The individual who had to shoot police officers because he felt threatened by them does not just get a reprimand because he felt threatened.
No.
It's not eye for an eye, because the escalation towards civilians is way higher.
Yeah.
If a civilian starts shooting police officers, oh no, they're going to be dead. They're not going to be taken in. They're not going to be arrested.
Right.
Whereas an officer that shoots civilians, well, we might reprimand them if people complain enough.
Sure. I guess, the things, a lot of the things that just do bother me is what we do here in America. And when you take situations, or when you take examples from other parts of the world. Now, granted, there are other parts of the world that are even more extreme in their choices of laying down the law, as it were, and punishing their citizens. But you also look at places like, I recently just saw a thing about how the Norway police force has not had a single shooting incident or death since 2006. That is 10 years, people. 10 fucking years. They have not had a single incident of extreme violence or shootings or death. That's 10 years. And yet they have had, in just 1 month in the United States, more shootings than Norway has had in the previous 10 years. Mm-hmm. And, you watch how they are trained, you watch how, they handle situations, and how much more, situational training they have to go through. It's surprising how we cannot try and emulate that model.
Yeah,
how we feel that by emulating that model that we're going to have a weaker police force. We're not.
Well, that's the thing, is there are more effective police forces throughout the world, and they are straight up effective. They're also more brutal, violent, and sadistic. The Turkish police force is a special one on that subject.
Absolutely.
But that's the thing, is, yes, you can have a very efficient police force that can get quite a bit done, as long as they don't have restrictions and all that. But the thing is, we like our freedoms too much to tell our police officers, you can just do whatever you want to, as long as you sort of kind of get the job done. We're not supposed to be afraid of police officers.
No.
The only time you should ever be afraid of a police officer is if you're a criminal. Mm-hmm. And if you're not a criminal, you shouldn't be afraid. That's simple logic.
Well, it's like, if you knew you fucked up, you should have fear.
Yeah.
You should be afraid of getting caught.
But when you're like, I am afraid of police officers. Why? What crime did you commit? I was born this color.
Right.
I was born in this place. I wear this particular headdress. I wear this particular outfit, and therefore I have to be afraid of law enforcement. To me, that's wrong.
Every time I've talked to a police officer, it's, when they're standing behind me with my hands behind my back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that shouldn't be the norm. That should not be the case.
Well, and even the folks that, there's folks running around right now that are absolutely terrified of police officers because of the outfit they wear, the religion they follow, or the color of their skin, or sometimes the delightful melange or combination of all of the above.
Yep.
And that should never be. The only time you should be afraid of a police officer is if you have committed a crime and you're afraid they're going to find out.
Right.
Other than that, they're supposed to be there to serve and protect everybody, not just the people they feel like.
Right.
Yeah, have to put that teacup away now, don't you?
Only because I know that I have to get home eventually. So yeah, we can continue this rant, but I think
I think we've beaten this horse severely to death.
Indeed.
We've killed it until it was dead.
And of course, there's so much more that goes into it, and you can have hours and hours of conversation and debate every little point and nuance and subject matter within a subject matter. But I guess just the whole point that started this rant is just treating people with respect.
Yeah.
And, just because you've met one person who identifies one way doesn't mean that every single person that identifies that way is going to be like that one person. Every gay man you meet is not going to be like the one gay man that's your best friend. It's just not the way it is. And
amazingly enough, they're actually just people and as diverse as any other people.
Right. The one officer that you met is not going to be like every officer you meet. Again, if you've met one of something, you've met one of something. As individuals, we have similarities, but we all come with a whole lot of differences, and we need to start learning to respect those differences. We need to start not only listening to people when you're having a conversation, but to hear that person, and that is giving them respect by actually hearing what they're saying and being able to have a dialogue without letting too much of your personal biases or shit get in the way. Just have a conversation. Listen to what that other person has to say. You might actually learn something. In fact, you will learn something, whether it's about that other person or maybe even something about yourself. Because we have a lot of biases that we don't recognize until we're faced with them.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you can learn that about yourself and start going, oh my god, I didn't realize that I was actually biased against so-and-so, then that's something that you have learned. You have bettered yourself as a human being by shutting your mouth and listening.
Well, and, we do have biases and we do have prejudices, and they're not necessarily a bad thing. The only problem is when it affects your behavior.
Right.
I have to say, if someone's like, yeah, I have my friend Bob, I want you to meet him, he's gay. I imagine that Bob is going to come in extremely tight and extremely stylish clothes and begin bounding around my house discussing exactly how he wants to decorate it. Now, that is actually a particularly inappropriate view to have. But that is what is going to be in my head. It's not like when Bob shows up dressed as a biker, and not like a, hey, biker, but yes, I'm a biker, and there's my hog out there kind of biker. I'm not going to sit there and look at him like, why aren't you giving me design suggestions about my house? Mm-hmm. Oh, wait, I actually have to deal with you as an individual and accept you the way you actually are, not just the way I thought about when someone mentioned you to me.
Right, just not the stereotype that gets played over and over, that all gay men are flamboyant and supposed to, know how to, create chiffon cakes and drapery for your, personal homestead. I know plenty of gay men who you give them a paintbrush and they have no clue what the fuck to do.
I can't drive a nail into a piece of wood with this. What the hell do you expect me to do with this thing?
But they can entirely rebuild your engine for your car.
Well, the thing is, it helps to know diversity of people just so that you have a bit of that background. But honestly, some of the stuff just sticks. I think about the number of, just the sheer number of homosexual people I know. Mm-hmm. But you say lesbian, I still think woman in comfortable shoes. And you say gay man, and I still think flamboyant and dancing around my house, talking about how I don't have enough Madonna in my music collection. these are just the things that are in there. But the thing is,
But the
it's
thing is-
okay to have that. It's just when you automatically expect that of people, and when you become disappointed when it affects your behavior, when it actually gets to the point of, and therefore I'm going to treat this person the way I expected them to be. That's when it becomes a problem. And like, if you're a police officer and a racist, whatever, I don't care. Just don't treat black people differently. Don't treat Muslim people differently. Don't treat anyone differently. Just do your job. When you get off your job and you're having drinks afterwards, if you want to talk about how much you hate people a different color, hey, that's your business. You're an adult. If you want to go home from your job as being a surgeon and going, I can't believe I actually had to work on a tranny today, fine, go home, complain about it. You weren't happy about it. But you know what? It's still your job. You do your job, you do it right. I don't care what your personal beliefs are. If you hate the people you're dealing with, I don't like everyone I cook for, but it doesn't mean I'm going to cook any less well for any of the people out there. Like
I don't like you, so I'm going to undercook your burger so hopes that you get sick.
Yeah,
No.
I do my job right. I don't care who you are. I have people come in all the time that are like, oh my god, I want to order this, but can I get it gluten-free? And I'm like, unless you actually have a gluten allergy, you're just being a prick. Because you've heard that gluten is evil, so you want to order gluten-free so you can be trendy. I hate you on principle because you're not actually thinking about any of this. But it's not like
extra for the gluten-free bun.
Yeah, well, actually, no. Place I work for, we don't charge anything extra at all.
Well,
so we're like,
But
but every time I'm like, jackass. Yes, gluten's going to make your penis fly off and explode. But, doesn't mean I make that food any less good than anybody else's.
Right.
In fact, half the time I actually like it. I may dislike the fact that someone comes in like, well, I need this gluten-free. But on the other hand, it gives me the chance to do what I love to do, which is to replate something. Because, our plating where I work is okay, but I think it could be better. I think a lot of it could be better. And the second someone's like, well, I want to change this or I want to rearrange this, it's like I get to make up how it goes on the plate. And then usually I take pictures and they're very pretty. But, much as I might dislike some jackass coming in there like, oh my god, all my trendy friends said we had to eat gluten-free, so we're eating gluten-free. Oh my. Like, fine, whatever. You're gluten-free, whatever. I may hate it. I may think it's stupid and incompetent. And, maybe only 5% of the people who even come and eat at the restaurant really need gluten-free food.
Yeah.
But much as I hate it, I don't care. I'm still going to do my job right. I'm still going to do my job well. If I have one of my waiters or waitresses come back and say, look, I need you to change something on the salad and make a new one because this person is being a complete and total bitch and treating everyone like crap. Personal response to that would be, get the fuck out.
Right.
You don't want to eat here? Fine. Get in your little fucking car and drive your little ass home. Oh, you came on your bike? Fuck you double. Get the fuck out. But my professional response, because I'm a professional, is, fine,
Sure.
Tell me what you need, and I will fix it, and I will make it right. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how much I might hate you as a person. I will make your food right because that's my job.
Yeah.
And then when I'm done making your food, and I see you somewhere else that's not my job, I will spit hate at you because I can. Mm-hmm. Because at that point, it's no longer a question of professionalism, and that is all I expect of other professions. If you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, if you're a medical professional, if you're, God help us all, a religious professional, there's already problems with that, but not getting into it. Just be professional about it. There is nothing professional about racism or sexism or any of the other isms.
No. No, and...
Transgenderism, I don't care what your issue is. It has nothing to do with your profession. It should
Right.
not affect your profession at all.
Right.
If you have personal issues with it, go home and be upset about it.
Right.
But before you do that, do your job.
Yeah. If you're a first responder and you have to give mouth-to-mouth to somebody who's transgender, deal with it. Or, they make masks, so you don't actually have to put your mouth on there.
And that's the thing is, everyone I know, every first responder I know has a safety mask.
Yeah.
We have one here, for fuck's sake.
You're supposed to.
And it's not even a matter of just I don't want to give mouth-to-mouth to a transgender. It's you have to give mouth-to-mouth whoever needs it. So if you're talking about, a junkie,
Mm-hmm.
or someone who has a severely communicable disease, or what have you, that can represent risks to you, which, at that point, when you're talking about creating risks for the first responder, that is a point at which I'll be like, you know what, I'm with the first responder on that one.
Yeah.
If they do not want to have risks thrown at them,
Yep.
they have a right to say no, as
Sure.
well they should.
Sure.
Like, if they pull up to a building and someone is in the window shooting at them, I do not expect them to get out of the vehicle anyway and go up to the 5th floor to find that guy who's having a heart attack.
Nope.
The first rule of rescuing is do not endanger your rescuers. Do not make your rescuers people that need rescuing.
Right.
Step 1. So things like that I understand, but when you've got, like, the masks that are specifically designed where you just put them over the nose and mouth, there's a little tube, you breathe into the tube, if something comes back up, the mask stops it.
Right.
That should be the only thing you have a concern about, and there is an insta-solution to that, which is immediately available to everyone who is a first responder. And like I said, fuck it, we have one.
Yeah.
Neither one of us are first responders, but, you know, let's face it, we do occasionally engage in colorful activities, and we hang out with people that engage in colorful activities, and if worse comes to worse, I want to know that I got that mask right there, and I can be like, stick it right on their face and give them the kiss of life with protection on.
Yes. Yeah, because I mean, you never know. Somebody may stop breathing for any number of reasons, and being prepared is not a bad thing.
Well, and especially when you may not know the person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't know, does that person have
And even if
HIV?
you do,
Is that
just
person heavily on drugs? Is that person likely to vomit out some blood or something else that can be transmitted immediately to you? And you're like, no, well,
No.
there's a mask. So, simple solution.
Right. Exactly. But just my rant ends with treat other people with respect. It is not a hard thing to do. It is much easier to be nice to someone and not fly off the handle and be a dick because of your own personal whatevers
Mm-hmm.
than it is to actually be the dick. Because, like, you don't agree? Fine. Say hi, have a great day, move along. Don't make your day worse and somebody else's day worse. Like, start a chain of good. Like, it's really not that hard. And people think that
It's
being
like starting
kind
a
to
daisy chain. At one point, you just have to suck it, and then someone else will do the same, and the next thing you know, daisy chain.
Mm-hmm. Just
That's how you start the orgy. All right.
orgies are good. Let's have happy orgies.
Yeah, let's do orgies. No more violence. All right, cool. Well, we're going to draw to a close on that point because we've already hit about an hour and a half, and that should be good, I think. Any final thoughts for the day, Mel?
No, I said my final thoughts. Go forth, have orgies, be happy.
I agree with Mel's thoughts.